We begin in Ottawa and the investigations into China's alleged meddling in Canadian elections. Just last hour, we saw a major reversal.
Ms. Telford is volunteering to come before the committee, so hopefully that puts other members' minds at ease. It's important that we're able to get to the heart of this matter, find out what Ms. Telford knew, when she knew it, and what the government did in response to that knowledge.
The Prime Minister's office now says Chief of Staff Katie Telford will testify before a Commons committee. That comes just ahead of a vote today on a Conservative motion that would have compelled Telford to appear. And the CBC's Janice McGregor is watching this story for us from our nation's capital. Okay, walk us through what's happened.
Right, because there's an awful lot of moving pieces here, so stay with me. That committee you were just seeing, Procedure and House Affairs, has just adjourned. I can tell you, in the end, it was unanimous, a motion to have Katie Telford appear. Imagine, so they had filibuster, multiple meetings where the Liberals were not letting them proceed to a vote to call on Katie Telford once the New Democrat on the committee, which has changed again, by the way, a different New Democrat than we saw when they were last meeting in the chair. Nevertheless, they sort of weren't allowing this to go through. And then she stepped forward and said, well, actually, I will. And then, boom, unanimous. They've agreed to have her appear for 2 hours, not necessarily alone. She might have some other officials with her. That's the wording as they amended it. And I can tell you the motion suggests it will be between April 3rd and the 14th. So not something that will be happening amid the Biden visit at the end of the week, the budget early next week. It would be kind of after all that, which is great because there's an awful lot going on in this town right now. But why? What was the thing that kind of shook this loose and caused this sort of reversal of position? I think that is what we are watching the hallway outside Cabinet to have explained. Because, you know, as recently as a few hours ago, we had no indication from the Liberals that they were going to step back from this point. But we did hear from Jagmeet Singh, their partner in a confidence and supply deal to, frankly, stay in power in this minority government. And he laid it out pretty plainly earlier this morning look, Telford needed to appear. If they weren't going to call a public inquiry, they needed to stop obstructing on at least this point as it pertained to parliamentary committees. Here's Jagmeet Singh from earlier.
If the Liberal government, if Justin Trudeau doesn't stop the obstruction that's going on in committee, if Justin Trudeau doesn't allow his Chief of Staff to testify, we will force him to do so by voting with the Opposition Day motion. We're going to make it very clear that we believe in doing everything possible to make sure Canadians have their questions answered.
So that vote will still go ahead on the main motion, kind of that was before the entire House yesterday. Interesting to see how the NDP votes on that motion, given what we now know happened at committee. Will they still vote with the other opposition parties? And that particular motion would have had Telford appear at a second committee, the Ethics Committee. It was Procedure and House Affairs, remember, that we were talking about, that just passed a motion to have her appear. So will she be at one committee or two? We'll see what happens to that vote later on this afternoon and what the NDP decide to do with that. But I'm just going to read you a statement from Telford's offer, I guess you can say, to appear. Again, reminding everybody that foreign interference shouldn't be a partisan issue, notwithstanding this entire thing we've been going through for the last 24 hours. But listen to this. She says, while there are serious constraints on what can be said in public about sensitive intelligence matters in an effort to make Parliament work, Ms. Telford has agreed to appear at the Procedure and House Affairs Committee as part of their study, agreed to appear at PROC, the committee where the motion just was, not necessarily at Ethics, which is what the motion up for voting this afternoon would have compelled her to appear at. So a lot going on here, but important to remember, it's not like she can come and kind of open the books on classified documents, right? There is another separate process already laid out by this PMO to sort of deal with the actual intelligence stuff that they didn't want to become a partisan football and that we can't be discussing in the public domain.
And interesting to see how things will go this afternoon, too, with that vote, given what we heard from the NDP leader. Now, while actually Jagmeet Singh was speaking and sort of giving that condition about support for a motion, we also know that the Prime Minister's office was busy sending out the mandate for the Special Rapporteur, David Johnston, who was announced that he would be looking into the allegations of foreign interference into Canada's election. So we know a little bit more about timeline and what he's going to specifically look at.
Yeah, finally some progress on that front, right? Because that was the other sort of criticism of the Prime Minister and the Liberals' approach to this. They had announced they'd have a special rapporteur, big gap, then we got a name where the terms of reference, big gap again, days go by. We don't know how this is going to work. Finally now, though, and is this to do with the discussions with the NDP on this? I don't know. But they have been forced into a bit more incremental progress here. So I can tell you that they're looking at just the 2019 and 2021 federal elections with this terms of reference. People were wondering the timing, how broad this would be. But this is not country specific. So a lot of the media reports have been about alleged interference by the Chinese Communist Party into Canadian democracy. But this could also deal with accusations from Russia, India, Iran, other countries, right? We know there have been more identified in previous reports about foreign interference. Interesting the timing, because it says that he is to recommend any additional mechanisms or processes, such as including a formal public inquiry. Johnson, remember, could call on the government to do that by May 23rd. So a pretty compressed timeline here for Johnson to consider whether that's necessary. He also is apparently going to identify what they call innovative approaches and improvements in the way agencies work together. So he's being given scope to do that. But significantly, who will he report to? Because again, people were saying, how could he be independent if he's reporting back to the Prime Minister, suggesting maybe we wouldn't really know all of his conclusions, that it could all be kept under the dome? No. Apparently, his reports will also be shared with leaders of the opposition and made available to Canadians. So we're going to have a line of sight on them, even though he obviously won't be able to discuss the specifics of the secure intelligence information that he'll be reviewing to reach these conclusions. All of his work is supposed to be wrapped up by October 31st. Would that be in time for the next federal election? One wonders. But we know this Parliament's going to live to fight another day. It's not all going to descend into chaos over this. They do have a way forward, and we watch now to see what other people say and how this vote goes this afternoon.
One does wonder. Okay, thanks, Janice. That's the
You're welcome.
CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa.